So given that the trigger for the Endless Calamity ability seems to be whatever an individual believes it is, I would like to tell you right here and now that your personal Calamity trigger is seeing this red subscribe button for the New World Review. And the only way to prevent Calamity is to press it, turning it into this peaceful, docile, wonderful, subscribed button, which will also result in regular JoJo content uploaded straight into your YouTube feed. Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and it would appear to be that time of month again, new JoJolion chapter, which is very, very exciting, and this one kind of crept up on me. I don't know about the rest of you, but it feels like chapter 95 came out like, I don't know, a week ago, so this was a nice surprise. And in addition to that, it was a super solid chapter as well, being Endless Calamity Part 2. And what I really loved about chapter 96 in general is that we are slowly but surely finally uncovering this maddening stand ability of the head doctor. Although it would seem that every time we receive a new piece of information, it comes with a new accompanying question, to the point where I'm now very much questioning whether or not the head doctor actually exists. And in that regard, I'm just curious, is there any doubt remaining in anybody's mind that Tohru is the stand user here? I mean, I personally still have a bit of doubt, and I'll get into why, but I've been very sus on this guy ever since he just showed up out of nowhere at the hospital, because he's just too intricately designed of a character, and this is far too late in the game for random acquaintances to have time invested into them. With that said, I thought he was going to be more of a surprise lackey villain, someone who had gone under the radar, but after this chapter, I'm getting to the point where I'm pretty damn convinced that he is more or less our head honcho responsible for this endless calamity. Or at the very least, I think that is what the goal of this chapter was to have us believe. And it's because just about everything in this chapter feels like it's designed to craft a narrative arrow straight into his general direction. So for example, Mamezuku, our delightful cult plant appraiser, who I will talk about later, posits the initial idea that this black suit-clad figure is indeed the stand itself, perhaps even an automatic type tracking its victims based on some sort of vaguely defined criteria. And what this chapter also made extraordinarily clear is that the head doctor figure is definitely in multiple locations at once, which I'm not sure was obvious prior to this chapter. I mean, yeah, maybe it was and I'm just a fool for missing it, that's entirely possible, but the cover page of chapter 96 also goes on to give this game away by having multiple figures, so Mamezuku obviously has the right idea, and as such this has turned into one of those search for the stand user battles. And so immediately after Mamezuku proposes this idea to himself, we cut to Yasuho, who phones Tohru, which is our first gigantic hint that he is more than what he seems to be, even without examining his art yet, because it's just intriguing juxtaposition. You know, saying something like, the stand user is out there, somewhere. And then immediately cutting to a scene, focusing on this seemingly unassuming character. And just look at the very first panel we see of Tohru with those cold, dead eyes, what a close-up. There's something quite terrifying about seeing an eye devoid of a pupil, and it's almost as if there's something, you know, not quite human about Tohru. And in this panel, he is clearly lacking any form of empathy, which is kind of strange, given how he professes to love Yasuho, and how much trouble she is currently in. It's almost as if this call isn't exactly a surprise to him. And that gets further reinforced throughout the page, as Tohru even continues eating lunch. So for someone in the midst of an endless calamity, he's pretty damn casual about this whole situation. Actually, you know what? If he does become a primary antagonist, then this is a great opportunity for Yasuho to score some narrative points by defeating him. Or at the very least, it might put a genuine romantic twist to the forefront of the story, with some sort of eventual clash between Josuke and Tohru, effectively boiling down to some kind of fight over Yasuho. Although who knows, maybe Tohru doesn't have any feelings for her whatsoever, and he's just acting to sow chaos into Josuke's party. Either way, it seems like the whole Josuke-Yasuho situation is going to receive a fair bit more focus in the very near future as a result of, well, whatever is going on here. Now, I will say the one thing that does give me some pause for thought about Tohru, and this could just be me wildly overthinking things as I have a tendency to do from a meta perspective, but it's that he might be set up to be a red herring. There's just something intriguing about how obviously this chapter lays out the idea of him being the stand user. I mean, it never literally states that Tohru is the wielder, but everything is clearly designed to point in his general direction, and that is something to be potentially wary of when you're involved in the mystery genre. If you are ever getting the answer just laid out in front of your eyes on a delicious silver platter, then often it can be a trap to subvert your expectations and throw something else at you instead. However, I do accept that I am probably greatly overthinking this idea, and for the reason I stated earlier, in that we are far too deep into the endgame of JoJolion for this sort of twist to happen, but then again, I've never really been able to predict Araki in any JoJo experience, least of all JoJolion, so yeah, we'll see where this takes us. I will also say though, as many others online have, Tohru's name also forms part of the head doctor's name being Satoru, and this particular shot of him in chapter 96 makes his hair look an awful lot like the rim of a bowler's hat. In fact, the curves are pretty much bang on, so I do think that this is a very purposeful connection being made to the head doctor by Araki given how intricately he constructs his art. In any other series, I would probably say that this is a wild coincidence, but not JoJo. But regardless of who controls it for now, the stand itself continues to be one of the most fascinating things I've ever encountered in the series, especially especially because even with Mamezuku's deductions, there are still so many questions regarding even basic aspects of it. Like, how is the stand triggered? Because it seems to work very differently for different people. Like for Josuke and Mamezuku, the trigger was whenever they physically approached the head doctor. And then for Yasuho, her personal trigger is seeing the doctor's face, while for Mitsuba, it seems to be seeing his back. And now in this chapter with Mr. Jail Dude, the effects seem based on karma. Although here's the very cool thing, the whole karma train of thought was suggested to the prisoner by Mamezuku, who kept insisting that there was a karmic link between the individual and the calamity, which would seem to suggest to us that the trigger for this stand is essentially whatever a person thinks the trigger is. And looking back on the initial head doctor chapters, it's an interesting idea because Josuke and Mamezuku do immediately accept their generated hypothesis that pursuit is what causes calamities. But Yasuho, on the other hand, seems almost entirely immune to everything happening until she looks at the doctor's face. So there's a lot of really fascinating stuff at play here, and I do love the idea that Mamezuku was using the prisoner in the first part of the chapter to test a theory regarding the trigger for the stand. And I wonder if he does indeed have that knowledge, and whether or not he will be able to conjure an immunity to it. But speaking of, that entire prison scene was wonderfully cold and brutal. I really didn't realize just how much I'd missed Mamezuku until he rocked up here and displayed his stark brilliance once more. I also didn't realize how much I'd missed his stand as well, doggy style. It's such a wonderfully versatile power, which reminds me of the craziness that Stone Free was able to achieve, and using it to sneak himself out of jail was very, very nice. In fact, the whole idea of escaping from jail by irritating someone to the point of self-harm, well, it very much epitomizes who Mamezuku is and what a compelling presence he is in JoJolion. A relatively late but completely essential addition to the story, in my opinion. Now, I've also seen some discussion regarding whether or not Mamezuku was the one responsible for stabbing the prisoner with doggy style, and to be honest, that is what I originally thought happened as well, just with how the panels are structured. Or at the very least, I thought that until I saw what his grander plan was. In retrospect, I highly doubt that this was the case, because it kind of undermines the entire point of Mamezuku mentally pushing the prisoner to that act of desperation. So yeah, my reading of it is that the prisoner self-harmed, and immediately afterwards, Mamezuku activated doggy style to hide amongst his body to escape. And really, that's very much how I would prefer it. There's something so terrifyingly interesting about Mamezuku making this happen without physically acting upon it. And of course, we should also remember that the whole Calamity business was also in play, so that could have been what delivered the final blow through the prisoner's karma trigger. And that's definitely not all, because we do get to make our way back to the Higashikata estate, and the good news is that either Norisuke isn't dead or Jobin has some sort of revival plan for him involving delicious fruit, as everything in JoJolion does. And it's kind of crazy because in this chapter, Jobin is actually portrayed as a reasonable and empathetic individual, which is in very stark contrast to chapter 95, where it was as if he had taken his final steps towards becoming the pure antagonist. And in my opinion, he probably still is. Even with this whole head doctor business in play, I still don't see anything really beyond Jobin. It would need to be a super last minute antagonist if there were anything else at all. But he certainly does not appear to be an antagonist in this chapter. He's just another guy caught up in this Calamity business, and it's interesting because he doesn't appear to be able to see the head doctor. And also this probably gave us my favorite part of the chapter, with the image of the head doctor making his way across the hallway and the various surfaces. And this stuff is pretty much right out of a horror thriller piece. And if a day ever comes when JoJolion is animated, this scene is going to be creepy as all hell. But in the end, Jobin decides to engage with the head doctor or the stand or whatever it is, and I can't say that I see this situation going particularly well for Jobin at all. If anything, I think this will result in Jobin also becoming a victim here, just with his own personal trigger. Like perhaps every time he tries to strike the stand, or maybe something much more detrimental like activating Speed King in the stand's presence in general, or anything along those lines, that forces Jobin into a similarly impossible position, just as with all of our other main cast at the moment. But something I do very much enjoy about this whole situation is that this really is a potential moment for the cast of JoJolion to come together and defeat a true threat like this. Kind of reminds me of the whole Ozone Baby situation, where Josuke and Jobin's groups were affected at the same time, and there was this interesting three-party dynamic happening within that battle. And this whole Calamity business puts that on a much larger scale, with significantly more intricate elements. I mean, there are so many separate simultaneous happenings. The Higashikata estate has urgent problems, Josuke and Mamezuku are acting on their own, Yasuho is also on her own, and yeah, I just love how this is currently being constructed as a story. There's great use of multiple threads here happening by hierarchy, and I'm very keen to see how they all come together to conclude this absolutely ridiculous enemy before we hop into the inevitable ending, because I have to assume that all of this has been taken care of by the time we reach the flash forward, right? I mean, from what we saw in the flash forward, nobody has a single care in the world, so surely the head doctor or whoever the stand user is has been dispatched by that point, and then we can harvest ourselves some wonderful fruit. In summary though, I think I enjoyed chapter 96 far more than 95, which was my first experience of reading JoJo monthly. Last month had a lot of dramatic oomph about it with the whole Norisuke situation, but the scope of chapter 96 and the focus on whatever the stand is has me completely hooked in every way. And as such, mid-May really cannot come fast enough, although I do hope that our current global climate does not come to impact JoJolion, which is serialized in Ultra Jump, I believe. And I guess I just have concerns because things have significantly affected Weekly Shonen Jump, as there was a suspected case in their office. But I digress. JoJolion chapter 96 was nothing short of fantastic, and as such, I eagerly await more. But what do you guys think? Please do let me know in the comments below. And if you're keen for some more JoJo content, then please do check out some of my other videos or even subscribe to the channel for regular JoJo wonder delivered straight into your YouTube feed. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.